What's up, everybody? It's another episode of the Joe and Joe Show. Got myself, Joe Rotunda, the assistant matchmaker for main events. Jolene Mazzone, head matchmaker for main events, and former NABF matchmaker of the year. That's fucking Apollo in the background barking. We also have behind the scenes Anthony Haynes. He's our millennial and producer, and we also have Alexis Sullivan. She's our creative director. Today we have Dan Rafael as our guest. Dan's the most notable and respected writer in the sport today, and he has been for years. And he currently hosts a new show on the Impact Network called Stars and Champions. Bring in Dan. Dan. What's up, dude?
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good. How are you?
All is well. I made sure to pour myself a drink for you guys.
Oh, you did? What are you drinking?
I'm drinking the hard stuff.
Cranberry juice?
Pineapple.
Oh, getting crazy. I
was so inspired by your beverage choices when I was watching your recent episode with my good friend Russell Peltz.
What do you have, Joe?
I have my Joe Exotic. Tiger. My Tiger.
Last time he was drinking a beer, and I think Joe, you were drinking some kind of vodka drink.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I drink.
I keep it American.
Apollo.
All right, cool, man. We'll jump right into the scorecards. So you're kind of familiar with it since you saw the Peltz episode. So we'll go 6 rounds. If you're in favor of the topic, you go 10-9. If you're not in favor, you deduct a point. So first.
You know, I'm okay with it. I'm not a huge fan of it personally, but I get it. You know, this is a business. People seem to enjoy it. As long as they're evenly matched and they're physically okay to go and do it, why not?
I'm with you.
I don't have to fight with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's
fun.
To me, I understood, you know, when Eddie Hearn did those fights, they drew a tremendous amount of attention. Otherwise, wouldn't necessarily be paying attention to a boxing event. My thought was, if you get people who aren't normally watching boxing to watch it because of a YouTube fight, and even a tiny little fraction of those people become enamored with the sport of the non-YouTubers, that's a positive thing in my mind.
All right.
Agreed. And they're on
All
the
right.
same level, so.
Yeah. All right, cool. Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield 3.
Oh, I've had so many people question me about that. I actually did a thing on the local sports radio here in DC about that earlier today. We did like 20 minutes. We were talking about that. I think that people are overcome with being at home and they need some kind of live sport potential to talk about. And I think that's what it is in my perspective was, you know, because you see a guy who's 53 who looked good on the mitts. You got to remember that the mitts don't punch back. And my thought is that when real sports start to come back, whether it's boxing, the NFL, Major League Baseball getting their season going, the NBA, that this sort of craziness will sort of, at least in my mind, fade from the public awareness and probably doesn't happen. I sure hope it doesn't. I mean, if it was an exhibition, I get it. I mean, I know about Evander has also been looking at do some kind of comeback maybe against Tyson. You know, fun to talk about, but probably not the greatest thing in terms of the execution.
Yeah, good point.
You should see Joe on the pads. He's a beast.
Are you holding them?
Yes, I know I use my hands like a Mayweather.
All right, cool. Next round, WBC Franchise Belt. We 10-9ing or deduct a couple points?
I think it's a disqualification.
All right.
I mean,
yeah, no, I don't disagree.
I've become very friendly with Mauricio Suleiman. We don't agree on everything by any stretch of the imagination. About issues, a lot of things that a lot of sanctioning bodies do, but we've gotten to know each other really well the last couple of years. I think he's a good guy, and we've had this conversation many times. I had dinner with him in Las Vegas and a few others back in February around the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury rematch. Champion was a topic of conversation. I just think it's a terrible idea. I understand the point of view that you want to help facilitate the biggest fights, and by allowing Lomachenko to do that or to have that go to a Canelo Alvarez is the problem that I have with it more than anything is that it's not an actual title. I mean, I've ripped the WBA 1,000 times for their craziness having titles. And I'm not trying to make excuses and say it's a good thing what the WBA is doing, but at least if you beat their super champion, if you beat the franchise champion in the ring, a Canelo or a Lomachenko, who are the two that have it at the moment, transfer. It's a trophy. So you can't win it in the ring and you can't lose it in the ring.
Right. I didn't even know that.
It's
I didn't know you couldn't lose
They
it.
announced that when they put out the announcement about the creation of it, when they gave it to Canelo Alvarez in the middleweight division, that was made explicit. And to me, you know, it's completely unnecessary. You know, as I said to Mauricio, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this.
So
one.
you don't like it, I take it, right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I just don't get it.
Go ahead,
All right.
Joe.
Cool. All right. So fuck the franchise belt. You'll like this one. Round 4. Manuel Chara holding one version of the WBA heavyweight title. 10-9 or deduct his whole life.
Nothing against Manuel Chara. Nice guy, you know, decent heavyweight, but to have him be called the WBA heavyweight champion is utterly preposterous, particularly when the guy that's the quote unquote real belt is Anthony Joshua, you know, who's at worst the second best heavyweight in the world at the moment.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah, you can't fault Char for that.
no, I don't fault Char, but the one thing about this, people say, well, the belts help these guys make more money. Well, WBA secondary title that Manuel Chara has been nothing but an anchor holding him down in the water because he hasn't fought for like over 2 years. Why? Because they've been trying to make these crazy mandatory fights that have fallen out for one reason or another that they can't get done. If he didn't have the belt, he would have gotten other opportunities, maybe not for the most amount of money in that fight, but he would have probably fought 2 or 3 times in this span of time and made money. So
Right.
he's got a title and he hasn't made squat with it. I mean, and nobody knows about it. Maybe in his hometown they care, but you know, nobody else gives a damn about it, in my opinion.
Joe Rotunda does.
I hate that shit. I hate that shit.
Man.
No. And
Here, Joe, you'll appreciate this. I hate it so much, I wouldn't even want the poster from the fight.
oh man, we have poster
Oh,
questions.
that's big.
We have poster questions later. All right, cool. So fuck Char. All right.
No.
No, I know.
The title, not the
Not
fight.
yeah. All right, round 5. Floyd Mayweather returning to box. 10-9 or deduct a point?
I deduct a point. I'll look. Floyd's a great
Let
fighter.
the young ones have it.
Floyd is one of the best of all time. You know, but at this point, he's made it very clear he doesn't want to tangle with the younger fighters from the next generation. I don't blame him. He's not interested to fight the top welterweights of the present day, whether it's a Crawford or a Errol Spence or Sean Porter or Keith Thurman or Danny Garcia or even like next level of contender. You know, and that's cool. But I mean, if he wants to go and do this, I mean, and fight another Conor McGregor fighter, you know, perhaps MMA fighter that doesn't know how to box.
All right, cool. You got that. All right, last one. Fight marinating.
Well, I was there ringside on the night that Bob Arum coined that phrase in reference to a question that I believe I asked at a doubleheader. Manuel Lopez and Yuri Ortiz Gamboa both appeared when they were, I believe, fighting in the featherweight division.
Right.
He wanted to marinate the fight, and it became a thing. And I took a lot of punishment and a lot of criticism over that. And I don't think I'm a big fan of it. I get you can't make every big fight immediately, and I totally understand that. I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with waiting, you know, a year and a half, 2 years, having several interim fights. Now, I'm going to give Bob some slack here. As Bob and I discussed over the years, the reason why he said that about that was because the amount of money that Lopez and Gamboa were asking for at the time simply was not there to do the fight. So in Bob's opinion was the way to make it bigger where I can actually pay these guys at least close to what they're asking for is to let it quote unquote marinate, which meant building their names up a little bit more, which meant having, you know, at least a couple more interim fights. But as a rule, not my preference, of course. You want to see the big fights when they make sense for the public.
Exactly. All right, cool. All right, sorry, excuse me. Jolene has a segment too that's actually brand new, and I'm fucking pumped for it. It's a good one. You want to start, Robbie, or not?
Yeah.
Is that the dog? That's the dog. That's Apollo.
This is Apollo Gaddy.
Apollo Gaddy, named after my favorite fighter.
He was very upset he wasn't involved. That's why.
I just want to see him jump over the fence like on your Instagram video.
Oh my God.
Now we
We
actually
started a new segment, and you got to make it short and sweet. Don't explain every fight. Just
Okay.
free or not.
Okay.
Robbed or not. Sugar Ray Leonard against Tommy Hearns. The draw, 1989.
No, Hearns was robbed.
That's what I'm saying. That's the fight. Was Hearns robbed?
Oh yes, Hearns was robbed. Yes.
You think he was
And
robbed?
Ray knows
Okay.
it. And Ray knows it.
Chavez against Whitaker. You think Whitaker was robbed?
Very badly. Maybe worse than, much worse than Tommy was against Ray.
Agreed. Bradley and Pacquiao.
The second worst decision I ever saw in person. Definitely robbed. Horrible. Pacquiao won that fight. And I joke around, I got to go slightly. I joke around with Tim Bradley to this day about it and tell Tim Bradley, even with that fight counting as an official win, I don't even reference that when I think about voting for Tim Bradley for the Hall of Fame. He belongs in the Hall of Fame, but not because of that win. That win.
Win, right. Kovalev Ward.
First fight, I felt Kovalev was robbed. I mean, and when I say robbed, it wasn't like the worst decision ever. I thought that Kovalev deserved the decision. He won a close
Right. It's not about, it's just, if you think the wrong guy got the decision, or it was a draw.
I thought Sergey deserved that win. Absolutely.
De La Hoya and Whitaker.
De La Hoya definitely won that fight.
Okay.
Close.
Go ahead.
I was saying it's close, but I definitely
Okay.
thought.
All right, no problem. Roy Jones and Park Si-hung.
Oh, the Olympic fight was the worst in the history of boxing, pro or amateur. Makes the Pacquiao loss to Bradley look like a great decision.
All
All right, go ahead, Joe. You did good.
I like
I
it.
was excited.
You didn't
I like
talk
this.
too long.
All right, cool. So what favorite fighter of all time? I think you answered it. You already said it's Arturo.
Oh, absolutely. And Jolene, you know that, and so does Jolene. Arturo has been my favorite fighter, ever since I saw him fight, probably the first time against Wilson Rodriguez, which was a mesmerizing fight to me.
Yes.
I've loved Gaddy ever since then, and last, I think, something like 12 of his, I put it like this, I forget the exact number, but I missed the first Mickey Ward Gaddy fight because of illness. I was supposed to go and cover it for USA Today. I got very sick the day or two before that, and I didn't end up making the trip. But from Gaddy to the end of his career, all those Atlantic City fights, I covered every single one of them, and I also covered, a few prior to the first Mickey Ward fight. So having covered his career, watched his career, gotten to know Arturo a bit, interviewed him many times, got to know his team. Just talked, as a matter of fact, a few days ago to Pat Lynch, my manager, for a story that I wrote for the Arturo Gatti Mickey Ward special issue of Ring Magazine that's coming up in the next couple of months. Arturo Gatti, my all-time favorite fighter. Matter of fact, I'll tell you this, Joe, and you know how many posters I have, as we've discussed before plenty of times. In my office, there's only one thing hanging on the wall that's boxing related, amazingly, and that's a gigantic charcoal portrait that I have of Arturo Gatti that Bella gave me as a wedding present.
Who did?
Lou DiBella.
I thought I sent it to you.
No.
So
Yeah. I'll text you a picture of it after we're done.
yeah, text me a picture because I think you're wrong.
All right. Next, what is your feeling on another writer stealing something you wrote first and not giving you credit? Do you approach them, or how do you guys handle that?
I've been accused of that a number of times, and I've definitely given the credit when it's deserved. Other guys think like they're the only ones that might make a phone call or have a tip and simultaneous things coming out. And I've had plenty of stuff ripped off for me. I don't give a damn. I and the best that I can, and to do that, what am I going to do? I'm going to go fist fight them?
Yeah, but do you see, it just happened to us with the Joe and Joe show.
Oh, what happened?
Somebody, another podcast, stole one of our questions and didn't give us credit. And it's not a question like, do you think Floyd Mayweather should come back? It's our original question.
I mean, I'd have to know the context and what the question was, but it seems to me that in boxing,
You'll get the question at the end of the podcast.
as reporters, we ask similar questions sometimes depending on the interview. Like I said,
Oh yeah,
to me,
no, it's not like a question like, oh, do you think De La Hoya should have won against Whitaker? No, it's, you ask the same questions. But
I would certainly never intentionally steal another reporter's original reporting. Now, that's not to say that we don't report on the same things at the same time.
of course.
And by the way, if I write something today where something is possible and in discussions or whatever, but it's not done. And like 3 months later, it actually becomes done and somebody else reports that it's done. I'm not going to accuse them of stealing what I wrote 3 months ago. And that happens all the time in this crazy business. So
Yeah.
I couldn't care less.
All right, cool. All right, who would you say besides yourself is one of the best journalists out there in boxing? One guy or girl?
I mean, it would be
Put
unfair
you on the
to just
spot.
no, it would be unfair to just name one, but I mean, I'll give props to guys that I've, of people that are covering it today. See, remember, when I started, I had the great pleasure to cover early fights in my career with guys that are all-time greats that are in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Ed Schuyler from the Associated Press and Michael Katz, who had just left the New York Daily News and was like really the first internet boxing reporter. He was working for the old website, Boxing. People that may not be remembered by everybody, but I certainly had massive respect. People like Jay Searcy from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Michael Hursley from the Chicago Tribune. I mean, there was those were a lot of guys that were covered, and then a lot of other guys that were around for many years, whether it was Ron Borges or George Kimball, the late George Kimball. I got a chance to cover fights with all those guys, but of the guys that are presently covering on the beat, I have a lot of respect for people like Keith Heidick at Boxing Scene.
Right.
I also now contribute stories.
Like Keith a lot.
I've become good friends, and I have a lot of respect for Lance Pugmire, who covered boxing for a long time at the LA Times, and now is covering boxing for the Athletic. And I don't want to forget anybody. Keith and Lance, top of the food chain in my book. Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated, also excellent. A good friend.
Don't give Chris Mannix any fucking props. Fuck him. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, cool. Let me see. All right, let's go to your fight posters. All-time favorite poster. What do you have? You probably have unofficially the deepest fight collection of posters in the game.
At least let's say of the modern time. I don't have that much stuff that's back in like the 50s and 60s. Let's say from the 80s up, a pretty deep collection. It's 5,000.
What's one of your favorite posters?
Some of them are duplicates. My
Answer
favorite
the
poster.
question.
It's like saying what's your favorite pet or your favorite kid. You love them.
One of.
Okay.
One
of
of.
my
All right,
favorite.
top,
One of my
top
favorites.
three.
All right, one of my favorites is definitely a fight poster from Roy Jones against Julio Gonzalez. Now, it's not the prettiest looking poster aesthetically. It's not a paper poster. That fight, if you recall, took place at the Staples Center. It was I think it was the first Roy Jones fight I went to cover in person, if I remember correctly. It was like 2000 or 2000. No, I think it was the second one, 2001. I'd covered the Eric Harding fight in any event. So on the undercard, the co-feature was a pay-per-view that Top Rank did with HBO. The co-feature was Eric Morales, who was defending his title at 122 pounds against In Jin Chi, who was the #1 contender from South Korea. And there's obviously a very large Korean population in Los Angeles. So what Top Rank did was they made a poster, thin cardboard, like, probably 11 by 14 or something like that, to hang up in the Korean neighborhoods to promote ticket sales for the fight. But instead of putting Roy Jones and Julio Gonzalez up on top of the poster, they made In Jin Chi against Eric Morales as the main event. And in addition to that, they put In Jin Chi on the left-hand side, which is usually the spot for the champion, and they put Eric Morales on the right-hand side. And my good friend and somebody that I'm sure you guys know, the great publicist Bill Kaplan, who lived in Los Angeles and was working for Top Rank at the time, those posters for me and gave it to me. And I always thought it was cool. It's all in Korean except for the Top Rank logo and their name. And it's just a really quirky, cool.
All right, stop, Dan. You went to Korean Town and stole a poster from a restaurant.
No, he didn't steal it. They gave
No, you.
PR folks. I didn't steal it. He gave it to me. They went.
Oh, no. We're going to have to.
It's a real cool poster, Now, another one that I will say, and I actually just posted it on Twitter yesterday because the anniversary of the first Arturo Gatti-Mickey Ward fight, the 18th anniversary was yesterday. And it's a very rare poster, and it's the site poster from the Mohegan Sun of the first Gatti Ward fight, which is very rare. I don't remember seeing any HBO artwork for that fight. And, it's a cool poster and from one of the great fights of all time.
Good one. All right.
I like Lewis Tyson.
What about Tyson?
I like the Lewis Tyson one.
Now there's a few. See, that's the thing. Like, as a sick, demented
HBO one.
Okay, HBO Showtime, but Lewis Tyson is on.
Oh, HBO Showtime. My bad.
Yeah. No, but see, that's the thing about being a psychopathic poster collector, such as I am. You know that especially for the big fights, there's usually more than one version, and there's sometimes totally different artwork.
Yes.
If you have a poster for Mayweather Pacquiao, I'm like, yeah, I got about 7 different ones.
All right, you got them all crazy with the fucking posters, Joe. Nuts on the posters.
I have one more poster.
Just had a half-hour explanation about a fucking poster.
All right, one more. One more. It'll be quick. Just name the poster. Have you ever thrown a poster out because the fight sucked so bad?
No.
Oh, no,
All right.
you would never.
Some fights are fucking. There are some bad fucking fights.
There
All
are.
right, who's your number 1 and number 2 pound for pound?
Right now, my number 1 is Canelo Alvarez. Number 2, Vasily Lomachenko.
All right, we can't fight him.
And if you tell me you have it reversed, I can accept that. I'll tell you what, I had Lomachenko number 1 for a long time. But after the way that Canelo defeated Kovalev, it was hard to not to rank him number 1. The combination of the level of guys he fought, the
We're
way
not
he
arguing with you.
No,
You're
I'm just
right.
giving you my explanation.
You literally have finally passed something that we agree with.
It happens.
It happens.
Errol Spence,
I have a
Danny
question.
Garcia.
If you could spend a day with a person in this business who has passed, who would it be?
Who has passed? Well, two people that I was very close to, who I still think about pretty much every day, are Dan Goosen and Manuel Stewart. So can I double?
Okay.
Could I have them both?
You
back
could have
for a day?
2. Yeah,
I'll have them both back. I'll take Emmanuel Stewart and Dan Goosen, and we would have a good time for that day.
All right. Mine would be Arturo Gatti.
Understood.
And Pernell Whitaker. I'd probably be dead after going out with them first.
No, I didn't. I mean, those are great guys. Also, I didn't know them the way you did, but I had
Right.
I had a very close relationship with both Dan and Emmanuel, and they were wonderful guys, and a lot of good times together.
Yeah. Go ahead,
All
Joe.
right, cool. Errol Spence, Danny Garcia. Apparently, it's in the works. How do you see that fight going down?
Not surprised it's in the works because that was supposed to be the fight in January before Errol suffered his injury. So the fact that they put it back together or are in the process of doing so does not in any way come as a surprise to me, particularly because Errol said he didn't want a tune-up fight. The thing about it is hard to pick the fight because I don't know what Errol lost from the car accident.
Yeah.
So if it's the Errol Spence pre-car accident, the way that he boxed against Sean Porter in his most recent fight that was in September, all due respect to Danny Garcia, but it'd be hard to pick against Errol Spence. But if Errol lost a little bit because of the physical situation that accident may have taken out of him, Danny Garcia is right there. I mean, Danny Garcia's a welterweight also.
Yeah, he ain't no tune-up fight.
Yeah, that's no tune-up fight. That's a real fight.
Yeah, great. All right. If you could keep one of the 4 major governing bodies in boxing, which one do you keep?
I would probably keep. Well, that's a hard one. Can I give 2 answers? I would definitely not keep the WBA. Screw them. Blow them up. Get rid of them. But if I had and nothing against the IBF, they do a good job of following their rules. I just think some of their rules are too antiquated and they've got a lot of issues with the way they handle their mandatory. So no disrespect to them, but they probably have to go. The WBC has the tradition, and I think they've been doing a very good job, franchise champion notwithstanding, in the last few years. So I would definitely want to keep them. And I think that Paco at the WBO, they do a very good job the way they handle their business also. I guess I'd have to say the WBA, or the WBO, and the WBC.
All right, that's fair. Let's do this.
That's a good question, though.
Thank you. If you could make one fight in the sport today, who do you make?
I guess you'd. I mean, if you could only make one, I guess it'd have to be Anthony Joshua against Tyson Fury. People want to see the ultimate heavyweight matchup. They're the 2 guys with the claim on the title. They're the guys that everybody ranks 1 and 2. And where you put them, they've got all the belts. That's a huge fight. So I guess I would make that my number 1. But there's other fights I'd love to see also. I'd still love to see Lomachenko against Mikey Garcia. At 135 pounds. There's a lot of good matchups you can make. I still want to see a lot of those crossover kind of fights. I want to see Errol Spence fight, Terrence Crawford crossover between Top Rank and PBC. But I guess if I had to pick just one, I'd say that heavyweight fight.
The heavyweights, I agree. It's the heavyweights.
We all love heavyweights.
Dog, yep.
Tyson.
That's your pick too, Jolene? Joshua Fury?
Yeah. What's yours?
honestly, without getting into it, I think Bivol better Biev. I don't care all the other dream fights that just
That's a good
aren't happening. Fuck them. They don't want to fight. It is what it is. Better Biev. Bivol to me is like who's elite at 75.
That's a tremendous matchup. I would love to see that also. The only
You're learning
reason I pick that is because that's not going to move the public.
Well,
No, it's not.
Yeah, but I get your point too. Yeah. All right, best fight you've ever covered live.
That's an easy one. May 7th, 2005, Mandalay Bay Event Center, lightweight title unification. Jose Luis Castillo in the first fight against Diego Corrales, and Corrales with the epic comeback and 10th round knockout victory. Hands down.
Great fucking fight.
Yeah. And I've covered a lot of top fight of the year type fights, but that's
crazy.
That takes the cake big time.
Great fight, but it doesn't beat Gaddy. Go ahead.
I wasn't at Gaddy Ward 1 though, so remember that.
Worst championship level fight you ever covered live.
Oh boy. Well, I covered a lot of John Ruiz fights. I covered.
Who's your other one? Come on. Wait.
Kevin Johnson.
No.
I don't think I ever covered Kevin in a championship fight though.
Oh, okay.
I wrote about his fight against Vitaly Klitschko, but I wasn't.
Malik Scott.
Malik Scott. I mean, I was not at his championship fight when he fought for the title. He never fought.
Wilder.
He didn't fight for the title against Wilder.
I thought he did.
That was before Deontay won the title.
Oh, all right, my bad.
Oh, but they fought.
But I mean, listen, and Malik and I are cool. We're friendly. I met Malik when he was like 19 years old. Matter of fact, I was at Lennox Lewis's training camp. He was training for the Tyson fight, and we went down myself and Ed Keene rode down to like the little grocery store in the town to pick up a couple of things. And Malik was there with Harold Knight, who was in Lennox's corner. And Malik was a young kid, 19 years old maybe at the time. He was sparring with Lennox. And so we struck up a nice friendship at that point. And then I started following his career. Jolene knows this. And every time I would go to a fight, he was on a lot of those Atlantic City undercards I covered. Every single time he was winning 60-54. He wouldn't put the guy away that was overmatched, that he'd overmatched. And he moved up to 8-round fights, and he's putting together wins that are just as boring. And so he was winning those fights, 80-72. So I put him as a nickname. I started calling him Malik 60-54 Scott. And when we moved up to I put him as Malik 80-72 Scott. And when Carl Moretti was still working for Top Rank at the time, for
main events
matchmaker, I said to Moretti one time at Atlantic City, Malik was in like maybe, I don't know, had to be like his 7th or 8th 8-rounder in a row. I said, Carl, you never put this dude in a 10-round fight. And Carl looked at me and dick and he goes, why, you want to watch another 2 rounds of that?
That's fucking funny. All right, cool. So, biggest upset in a fight that you witnessed live?
Biggest upset? Boy, that's a good question. Got to jog my memory here on a few. I mean,
Didn't you say Bradley Pacquiao?
I was there for De La Hoya Pacquiao, which was.
You think that was
originally.
No, Bradley Pacquiao.
Yeah, but I don't consider that to be a real win, though. So, no.
What was the question?
The biggest upset that I've been at.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm drinking too much. Go ahead.
So I was thinking Pacquiao-Oscar, because Oscar was such a prohibitive favorite. That fight always stuck out to me because the way that fight actually ever generated was I'm good friends with Larry Merchant, and we would bullshit about boxing on the phone all the time. And so one day I called him up, and we were shooting the shit about whatever, and we were discussing like what Oscar should do. And Larry's like, I have a great idea. I'm like, well, tell me. And he started to give me all the reasons why he should fight Manny Pacquiao, who I remember at the time had just fought as a lightweight. Oscar was, a 154-pound fighter at that time. And I said, Larry, you're just, you're nuts. You're crazy. I was like, joking around with him. And all right, so we finished with the call. And the next day that night actually, I started thinking about it. He's not as crazy as it sounds. So I called Larry back the next day. I said, Larry, all that stuff you told me yesterday about fighting Oscar, tell me that again. I want to write a column about that. So we went through the whole thing, and he gave me all his reasons. And I wrote a column, and before I wrote the column, so I hang up the phone with Larry, and I call up Bob Arum, who at the time wasn't promoting Oscar anymore, was now Manny Pacquiao's promoter. And I said to Arum, I said, Bob, humor me for a minute. Larry Merchant and I were discussing this yesterday, and this is what he told me about Pacquiao and Oscar. And I thought Bob was going to be like, you're effing crazy and just, hang up on me or something crazy like that. Bob was very quiet for a few seconds. It felt like it was like 5 minutes he was quiet. And he was like, well, take it. Like Bob could see what it could become financially and in terms of the public interest in the match, because Pacquiao was, a firecracker at that time, and Oscar was still Oscar. And so it wasn't the next fight. It took some time, but ultimately they made the fight. And what did they call the fight? They called it the dream match because they dreamed it up. I wrote about it in my column. It got picked up everywhere, and ultimately it became a huge fight. And people thought it was a death match. People thought that Oscar was going to annihilate the little guy. Manny Pacquiao turned the tables and just beat the living shit out of him and retired him. And so maybe that's not the biggest upset in terms of the odds I ever covered.
So we got that whole fucking story, and that's not your biggest upset?
Well, I'm saying, but that's what I'm saying. It maybe in terms of what the odds were, it wasn't the biggest upset. But in my mind,
right, how it all transitioned, and I'm
sure I'm forgetting something, some big upset I've covered. I've covered a lot of them.
What's your favorite venue to cover a fight at?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I'd have to say Mandalay Bay. They built it with boxing in mind. They don't utilize it as much now as they once did. Once the MGM company bought out the MGM, the Mandalay Bay company, they stopped using it all the time. So there was just sporadic usage for their major fights.
I agree. I like Mandalay too.
It's a great venue for fights.
All right. We have our final question that was stolen from us. And this is an original Joe and Joe show question.
Okay.
If there's one person in the industry that you could punch, trip, slap, or lock in a room, who would that be?
Oh, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Come on, Joe.
Oh, stop it.
not today.
There's some people that I need a slap every now and then.
That's true, you do. But I
locked in a room.
I enjoy when you abuse me. It's all good.
So come on, pick somebody. Don't punk out.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of who that would be.
We could, if you really can't think of anyone, I guess we could just say the WBA.
Well, absolutely. Listen, and the funny thing about the WBA business is, on a personal level, like if we're just at a fight and we're just shooting the shit or we see each other,
they're cool.
I like Gilberto Mendoza Jr. He's a very nice individual. He's enjoyable to be with.
Agreed.
But as an organization, I would like to punch, trip, kill, lock up, do all those things to the WBA. I think they've ruined boxing in large respect for what they've done. They've just made certain elements of it such a mockery. You'd have to look with a straight face to tell somebody that it's bad enough that there's 4 organizations with 4 titles, but to have to tell somebody that this one organization, 3 or 4 different people with titles, is just a joke at the world level. And it just
answered it. WBA.
WBA it is.
All right. We got to wrap it up. Dan, you've been real. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you, man.
My pleasure.
And keep in touch.
I just feel like you didn't abuse me enough, though.
Come back next week.
We have other shows.
Cool. All right, guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Keep the faith. Hope to see you guys both back at ringside soon.
Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Take care. Thank you.
You bet.